This is who we are. 5 minutes of Marquette County history. The Cramer Memorial Institute in Packwaukee. You may have heard that at one time Packwaukee had a hospital, or maybe you heard that it had an insane asylum. It didn't have either of these, but it did have the Cramer Memorial Institute, a health spa wellness center that offered an array of treatments for various ailments. And how it came to be is an interesting story in itself. It all begins with the influx of settlers to Wisconsin after the last treaty was signed with the Indians, and land that used to be theirs was opened up to those who wanted to try their luck on the cheap land being sold for $1.25 an acre by the government. This 1851 survey map shows the lay of the land by what is now Packwaukee. A ferry ran from the south side of the Fox River to the north, and on this ferry in 1850 came one of many families. Charles and Alice Barker came with their daughter Harriet. Charles was born in New York, the son of a Revolutionary War soldier, and Alice was born in Ireland. In 1850, the landscape would have been something like this: open prairie with clumps of oaks, and along the widening of the Fox River called Buffalo Lake, Indian mounds, over 500 of them circling the lake. Still called Indian Land in the 1850 census, Charles, Alice, Harriet, and newly born John settled just west of what is now the community of Packwaukee. Harriet was 2 years old. In her later years, Harriet described her childhood in Marquette County. Their possessions were in a prairie schooner pulled by a team of oxen and included the family Bible, 4 hammered silver spoons, 2 woolen blankets made by Harriet's grandmother, and other blankets from her mother's family in Ireland, a stove, kettles, a feather bed, and patchwork quilts. In her memoir, Mrs. Cramer recalls the pleasant relationship with scores of Ho-Chunk, then called Winnebago Indians, who still lived in the area. Indians often stayed inside settler cabins in cold weather, and the settlers fed them. In turn, Harriet recalled that the Ho-Chunk people gave gifts to the family of venison and fish. Life was both good and bad for the Barkers. While the family settled into their new home and were successful in many ways, tragedy, all too common at the time, also settled in. The small headstone in Oak Hill Cemetery shows that 2 children were lost in March of 1854, just days apart. Little John and a new addition to the family, Mary, both died. Other deaths in 1854 in this and another cemetery hint that it may have been disease like cholera, which was hitting Wisconsin hard at that time, or it may have been another illness like diphtheria or typhoid. Whatever the cause, the Barkers lost 2 children within days. They are buried next to their parents. Harriet, however, grew into a young woman and was sent to a finishing school in Europe. She came back to the United States to forge her way into a career unusual at the time. Her biography in Famous Wisconsin Women tells us that she taught school in Packwaukee for 2 years, then moved to Milwaukee to take a job at the Evening Wisconsin newspaper as a typesetter and proofreader. It was there that she met the very popular and acclaimed newspaper editor, William Cramer. Despite a 30-year age difference, Harriet and William married and set off on a European honeymoon. Their lives together were rich with experiences. They were locked up in Paris during the Franco-German War, along with other Americans. In 1872, William headed the electoral ticket and gave the vote of Wisconsin to General Ulysses S. Grant. After 3 years of travel, the Cramers returned to Milwaukee and back to newspaper work. They lived in the posh Newhall Hotel when, in 1883, an arson fire killed at least 28 people, and Harriet had to carry an injured William to safety. They were both badly burned. Back in her childhood home, where her parents had built a grand house on the lake, Packwaukee was a growing community. It had 2 wharves for steamboats and barges to offload and pick up goods, and had a railroad that headed north to Stevens Point with a spur to Montello. This photo shows Packwaukee looking west. That house at the end of the street is the Barker home. William and Harriet Cramer used the family home for their summer residence and kept it open all year. William especially loved the location and house and chose to go there instead of to famous spas elsewhere when his health was failing. Records show that the springs around Packwaukee were recognized as special as far back as the time of the voyage of Father Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet in 1673. Marquette's journals tell him of drinking from mineral water springs along the Fox River. While there is some question of exactly where those springs were, there is some possibility and conjecture that they were the ones around Packwaukee. In 1887, Reuben Goldthwaite published Down Historic Waterways. His diary of his journey by canoe on the Fox River included a speculation that the springs around Packwaukee, quote, must indeed be rated as available for a sanitarium, unquote. Other writers praise a number of springs as having medicinal value, including those in front of what was to become the Cramer Institute, as well as others along the lake. William died in 1905 at their summer home in Packwaukee. Here is Harriet on the porch of their Packwaukee home wearing morning clothes. It's hard to emphasize enough how respected William E. Cramer was in Wisconsin as a newspaperman. His obituary lauded his career and life. A bust of the man was dedicated and placed in Madison in 1894, and in his will he left large sums of money to various charities. Harriet was distraught at losing William. She lived in Milwaukee and used the Packwaukee home for rest and relaxation. She became a well-known and successful newspaper editor in her own right, and in 1918 decided to give the house and the 40 acres of property to a group of Packwaukee citizens interested in starting a health spa there. It was also reported that extensive work was done on the home and an additional building put up on the grounds that was to provide room for 60 beds. The idea of health spas was rampant around the country at this time. In 1888, Dr. John Kellogg had founded the Western Health Reform Institute, which was turned into his famous Battle Creek Sanitarium in 1906. People came from around the world to receive treatment there. The treatments included special diets, hydropathy, electrotherapeutics, and also encouraged vegetarianism and plenty of yogurt and cornflakes. The mineral springs of Packwaukee were just waiting to be shared with people hungry for health. After the founding of Battle Creek Health Spa and other spas around the country, World War I, with its returning injured soldiers, as well as the thousands of deaths from the Spanish flu, made the public yearning for opportunities to turn to health and healing. So, with the world waiting for another health spa, Packwaukee folks formed a corporation for a sanitarium and health institute. The Cramer Memorial Institute promoted sparkling and healing waters and relaxation for urban folk. It was dedicated in 1919, and at the dedication, speaker after speaker praised the landscape, waters, and rural lush views in Packwaukee. The marketing stressed that Packwaukee was long known for its healing attributes and that visitors would find the land rich in healthful aspects. A Dr. H.A. Schmidt was named the superintendent, and advertising began in earnest. Schmidt was an expert in the Caneep water cure. The Caneep water cure was imported from Germany. Father Sebastian Kniep developed what became known as the Kniep cure during his study and practice of natural cures or naturopathy. The cure was treatment with cold water, and Packwaukee's numerous springs, 2 of which could be found just outside the doors of the Cramer Institute, provided the perfect place for practitioners of the Kniep therapy. The Kniep treatment is still used today. It includes water therapy, herbal treatments, special diet, moderate exercise, and inner balance. Other treatments at the Cramer Institute have been proven less than acceptable, like X-rays and electricity. In 1919, the Institute announced plans for a grand new building. It would have terrazzo floors, Spanish tile roof, and be fireproof. It was to be 3 stories high with kitchen and baths in the basement and sleeping porches and sun parlors on all floors. It would have cost $100,000 to build. Baths would include steam, electric, mud, hay, flour, and oatmeal. State Highway 10 gave direct access to the Institute, the announcement said. But the shining star was not to be. We're not sure exactly what happened to this dream, but disaster befell both Packwaukee and the Cramer Memorial Institute over the next few years. There was a devastating fire in Packwaukee in 1922, where the Kellogg Lumberyard, Russell Hotel, the Lutheran Church, and other businesses burned. The Packwaukee Farmers State Bank closed in 1923, making news around the state. And records show that in 1922, the Central Mutual Hail and Cyclone Insurance Company and Farmers State Bank sued H.A. Schmidt for garnishment to repay debt. H.A. Schmidt was the superintendent of the Cramer Institute. We don't know what happened to the doctor after that. The next word of the Barker home that had become the Cramer Memorial Institute was a society announcement in the newspaper that the Whitliff family hosted 2 other Milwaukee families at their summer home, which was the old Cramer Institute. Harriet Barker Cramer had no role in the Cramer Memorial Institute except for donating the house and 40 acres of land to the founders of the health spa. She died in 1922 in Milwaukee and is buried with her beloved husband and a brother who lived in California at Forest Lawn Cemetery. This Packwaukee girl left a rich legacy of her own, her success in the newspaper business part of her history. Upon her death, Harriet donated over $1 million to Marquette University. That's over $17 million today. She is remembered in books and on plaques, like this one next to a statue she commissioned by the Italian sculptor Dupre. It is a 2/3 sized replica of his Piate and was placed at St. Gall's Church and later moved to Jesu Church in Milwaukee. A few years after the Cramer Institute closed, the Barker home burned.